would track particular topics. And I just wonder whether others had tried that or had other ideas for engaging their advocacy volunteers. We've done a very good job of reaching out to them and getting them excited. It's now about getting them out there and doing things actively where they feel like they are making a difference.
Okay. Thank you very much, Breck. That's a really good question. And I see March has her hand up.
Hi, I'm the advocacy staff person director in Alaska. And so I have a question. I'll address Breck's question as well, but I do have a question for Rob, going back to Rob as an advocacy volunteer in his state, which is, how have you been asked for feedback on your engagement as an advocacy volunteer? And has that been enough? Has that been satisfying to you?
I'm not sure we've been directly asked for feedback on the process. We have some new folks. There's a new advocacy person in the Kansas office, and he's being a little more proactive. The other guy seemed to be pretty effective legislatively, but was not quite as dynamic and engaging with the volunteers. And I guess I'm looking at AARP more broadly rather than just legislatively. If you want to mount a legislative wave, you can't have a little closet group that meets once a week or once a month and says, the 8 of us are going to talk about legislative things and we ought to all go up to the Capitol and knock on doors, but 4 of us can't go because we're old or traveling or whatever else. I think you need a broader agenda of how does AARP engage with the general population in an effective and meaningful way. And when I was CEO of a company, I always said, if I'm holding a meeting, how do I make that meeting the most significant thing you've got to do right now, the most important thing you've got to do right now? I don't just have meetings to have meetings. And I think AARP would have to figure out, if I'm going to engage these people, how do I do it in a way that's important to them, rather than just saying, oh, we're going to have a meeting and we'll figure out the agenda when we get there.
Thank you for that feedback. And then on Breck's question, I know each state does it differently in terms of their priorities and their policy agenda each year, but in my state, in Alaska, we've done 3 to 5 priorities per year, and different people are more engaged in different ones of those. And we have, kind of drawn this last year, just tried drawing a couple of those into a theme in a multi-year campaign, like your paid leave campaign. And it does, for something big and multi-year, it does take a concerted campaign. So something needs to be highlighted, rather than everything that we work on. But I think you can strike a balance, and I know some states do, kind of break into teams to specialize on different advocacy policy areas. But when I tried to do that, I found that most people had interest in all of them and wanted to hear and work on all of them anyway. And so I kind of pulled back from the specialist aspect. But yeah, certainly different people have different strengths. Thank you.
Thanks for that.
I was just going to add real quick. I agree with what you just said. The all-out kind of blanket invite, even though we do have groups and volunteers that are, what we consider advocacy volunteers or legislative volunteers, we invite them to everything, to events, fun, anything and everything. And it's my motto, my tagline is, you do what you want when you can. So they don't even have to answer me, but we make sure that they're all invited. And like we've been getting at, I think a little bit, the more involved you are and the more engaged, the higher your retention rate will be. And, you know, back to the numbers, I guess we could say too. So that's my final say on that.
Well, thank you very much, Ellen. And I see that Susan has put some information in the chat related to Virginia. Would you like to elaborate a bit more on what you've said or written?
Okay, so this is Susan, and I am not an advocacy person. I'm a community action team lead. But yeah, our staff member just reached out and said, hey, I want to do Piketon politics in December to start preparing for the Virginia General Assembly meetings that start in January. And from what I understand, what he wants us to do is start getting feedback. So I'm in Northern Virginia, which is one of the highly populated parts of Virginia. Our capital's in Richmond, about a 2-hour drive away. And I believe he's going to be doing this in different population centers across the state. But, you know, it's supposed to be just a chance for us to talk about it, about the politics and stuff. I was also going to say that our AARP staff member who's responsible for community development in Northern Virginia has split us into different community action teams. And for states that are like what you talked about earlier with Kansas being your population centers are different in different locations from your state capital. And that would, you know, be true for a lot of states. Breaking into smaller volunteer-led community action teams where they can focus on their local area and provide feedback across the state could be something worth thinking about.
Great. Thank you, Susan, for sharing that information with this group. And I saw a couple of heads nodding. And Susan, I'm so glad you raised your hand. I saw your head nodding. So please come on and speak. You're muted.
Susan DeCamp, I am the volunteer state president for Nebraska. We have been for the last 2 years, and I was on the executive council for 6 years prior to that and very involved. I'm one of the advocacy leads, but I totally agree with what Susan Jones just said about having community action teams. We have community action teams throughout the state as well, and they work on their local community, you know, getting AARP information out and doing events surrounding, you know, things like Medicare, even tours of places. But then at each one of those meetings, we also touch a little bit on advocacy and let them know other areas of interest, areas that we're working on that might be of interest to them, like in advocacy or diversity, those types of things. And a lot of times we'll snag people then from the community action teams who also want to belong to advocacy. And then they start getting involved in those other areas too. And that works really well. And, you know, we have advocacy members all across our state who are very active. And we put out a monthly, our advocacy communications, or our advocacy director for the state puts out a weekly newsletter regarding advocacy. But a lot of times she will also post pictures of other events that we have been doing at those community action teams and diversity teams, just to, you know, raise a little interest for the advocacy volunteers in some of the other areas as well. So that's all I have to say.
Oh, right. Thank you very much. Susan, you know, we'll get back to some of the things that you said, but I want to get to Becky now.
I kind of jumped in a little bit late, but as soon as I heard the community action teams, the way the states are doing it, One of the things about those is if you're not in a general physical location of a CAT team, you're kind of out there without anything to hold. Does some of the states address those, the people that are not in a physical location to be in a CAT team?
Susan, is that a comment for you?
I guess I would say, unfortunately, we don't. We are a large state, you know, and we have way out west. We have members, and most of them are involved in advocacy, but there's really not a way for them to participate in community action teams. However, we do a lot of statewide videos on topics, and we put those out there for, you know, everyone in the state. And like for our advocacy, we did interviews with every one of our state legislator candidates who wanted to do them. And so that included districts all across the state. And then we videotaped them and sent them out to, you know, the AARP constituents in those areas out west. But you know, we do want to try and think of a way to involve them more in our community action teams, you know, other than just the advocacy. So that's a great question, and that's something we would like to work on as well.
Okay, thank you, Susan. And thank you, Becky. And both of you have moved us into really another aspect of the questions that Ellen was starting with. And that is, how do you manage and communicate the actions that you're taking or want to take? Because I know that Susan just mentioned there's a weekly newsletter that goes out, but is that something that's practical for everyone? Or what are some of the other ways that you communicate with this larger team of people to make sure they're involved? Anyone want to?
Me again, I would just say that we do have a monthly advocacy statewide meeting as well on Zoom. We have it at a particular location in somewhere in the state. We have like 3 or 4 different locations, but then every one of those is also on Zoom. So we have participants from all over the state monthly at those advocacy Zoom meetings.
Okay, so we're using Zoom, we've got newsletters. What else are people doing at this point to be able to communicate? You know, sometimes we've got differences, we've got impediments to the actions we think we might want to take, or that's really important to a volunteer, but it may not be something that fits within the plan. How do we communicate those back? Linda, I see your hand.
Yeah, my advisory council, some people call it an executive council. We call it an advisory council in Vermont.
Okay.
But it's made up of different volunteer leaders for driver safety, tax aid, fraud, livable advocacy. And I'm in communication with them pretty much every month and find out what kinds of if there are issues, if there are concerns, if there are needs, those kinds of things. And so through that advisory council email thread or calls, able to find out how things are going with the volunteers. And it really makes a difference. I know during the pandemic, it was particularly hard, especially with tax aid, even though I know that's a whole different foundation group. The volunteers, there are many volunteers that represent AARP in the best possible ways. But it was important to me to keep up with all of those volunteers that represent AARP across the state. So, you know, that's just one way, is to involve your lead volunteers with someone that can handle that kind of question and answer period or consult with staff.
Great. Thank you very much for sharing that. I think that's very, very helpful. And then there is the small conversation going on in the chat related to, are people using chatter groups on the portal? is that something that's worked out? And I just see that, let's see, we've got a couple of people who've responded. Greg has said something, but Mary has also tried to do something. Is Mary, would you like to explain a little bit more about what you're trying to accomplish with Chatter?
Hi, I don't know if you can hear me or not. I'm
Yes,
using
we
my
can.
iPad.
Yes, we can hear
And
you.
it is an experience. So it becomes sporadic with Chatter. So, you know, we've gone and showed the various groups, advocacy communities, Speakers Bureau, how to use Chatter. Right now, what I'm doing is every time we get our events, our monthly flyers, I'm posting them in all the groups. And if something happens in a particular session, you know, something that pertains to advocacy of the community, we're making comments to get people to see that you can use the Chatter. I think the only active group that's really using it a lot is our Speakers Bureau. Because they're using it to talk back and forth about presentations and that. So it's a process.
Okay, that's fine. I think Greg also had something to say in the chat. Greg Crawford, would you like to elaborate a little bit on what you've said?
Well, we've been trying to promote Chatter and train Chatter. I think we'd have more people who would use Chatter if they felt they were able to navigate the portal better. It is a struggle, and it goes back even a step. There are people that their devices are just not configured. I've had one episode where we went to get into Chatter, and whatever it was, her operating system was so out of date, the AARP app wouldn't load or launch on that particular browser. So I'm doing one-on-one with 340 people. You know, well, there's probably 200 plus that have not gotten into Chatter. So it's going to be slow going. And then content, you know, getting content from everybody is what's needed, and to make it something that people want to go in and check on.
Right. And trying to find that content at the time you need it seems to always be a question that we've got as well. So thank you very much, Greg. And there continues to be a conversation in Chatter, and this Chatter group will be, of course, shared with you. We have another question that I wanted to ask, and that is, were you able to find ways to use the available talents of your amazing volunteers this year? Or, and from a volunteer perspective, like me, were you able to contribute everything that you thought you could? And if not, or if you did, what support might have been helpful, possibly even from OVE or anyone, to make sure that more people understood they could be a part of a larger team and a part of your success? I could see people shaking their heads as I'm speaking, but come on. Anybody want to add something?
Could you repeat the question?
Were you able to find ways to use the available and amazing talents of volunteers? And if you're a volunteer, do you feel that your talents were used, and what could have helped to improve that use this year? Because we've got staff and volunteers on this screen right here. And this is a way for people to find out what makes volunteers tick. Okay, Byron's put his hand up. Go on, Byron, it's on you.
Yeah, Tennessee is divided into 3 regions, East, Middle, and West, and I live in the middle region. And I would say that we've been able to create more opportunities for our volunteers by the creation of our Speakers Bureau here in the middle region. We've got, I think we have 6 volunteers who are speakers. We have 2 volunteers who are going to handle the tech part of doing the presentations. We have our quarterly meeting scheduled for November 20th. And at that meeting with all of our volunteers, which will be somewhere around 30 to 40 volunteers who will join us together, we're going to actually do a short presentation of one of the DIYs to give our volunteers a better feel of what this is all about. And then we're going to do the pitch for our needing more volunteers to be part of the Speakers Bureau, to take on the speaker's role or the other roles that help facilitate the Speakers Bureau. So long story short is our Speakers Bureau is providing a great opportunity for our volunteers, an opportunity for us to be out in the community and help to educate our membership and others. So that's where we are.
Okay.
Can I ask a question, Deborah?
Yes.
Byron, are your your DIY programs, are they delivered virtually or in person?
No, right. We can offer both, but the requests so far have all been in person.
In person. Okay.
Yes. We've got a group. We did one this morning and one in Clarksville, Tennessee. And I think we have another one that's being done in Nashville tomorrow. All in person.
Okay. Well, thank you, Byron. And thank you, Linda, for that question. And I can just say from my volunteer experience, being the speaker, I've had the opportunity to do both virtual, in person, and hybrid, and trying to remember not to put the screen behind me so that the people on the screen are looking at my backside and while they're trying to listen. So, you know, it's a unique skill, but we're still learning how to do all 3 of those things in Kentucky. So thank you very much for that. It is possible, but you do have to remember to move in the right direction. All right, Miss Susan, you've got your hand up, huh? You're muted again.
So, yep, sorry, I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but I just wanted to add along the lines of the Speakers Bureau. We put out a specific call for people interested in fraud and interested in giving fraud presentations. And we put that out statewide, and we were overwhelmed by the response we got. People that were interested in that topic and interested in actually doing the presentations. And so we had like 15 people volunteer to do that. So we've got a great start to our fraud program this year. They had set a goal of presenting 24 presentations, mostly in the not the rural areas, mostly in the, you know, the city areas. And they met that goal before the year was halfway over. So we tapped into those kind of skills that the volunteers wanted to use. And they have had great reception. So.
Great. But you gave your volunteers a choice and a chance, and that's wonderful. Ms. Jones, Susan.
I know there's 2 Susans here. It gets confusing. Right. So one suggestion I would have is that you expand the DIYs to include more than Speaker Bureau events. Like, for example, we did a really fun fraud trivia game. Again, we did it in a brewery, but you could do it anywhere. And we have all those materials that we could share. But, you know, the DIY is only focused on the Speakers Bureaus. We also did some we've done several bigger events like that we could share if there was a good place to put that stuff.
Okay, so you're saying that the DIYs from your perspective, the way you've seen them, it really caters.
But they're only focused to the Speakers Bureau. It doesn't cater to other types of events.
Okay, so okay, I see. I think I see what you're saying. Where if there's, for example, you're trying to do trivia, there's no place to get that by going to the DIYs. Is there some place out online? Yes, I mean that's what we do, and you probably did that as well to come up with trivia, right?
Well,
Is that what you
our staff member worked with a staff member from a different state, and we all worked together to come up with the questions that we used on our fraud
Sure.
trivia. And we shared ideas on to how to set that up. But that required a relationship between our staff member and this other state's staff member. I can't even actually remember what other state, but like if we had a place to put these things that are not Speaker Bureau, but other event kinds of things, because we put this whole thing together, I mean, it might as well be used by all the other states.
Would you be opposed to sending that your outline, whatever it is, to us so that we can put it on the 360 exchange in those files?
I could do that.
Okay. Because, and I wanted to remind people that we have a repository of information, and when we're sitting here talking about planning and bringing people on to engagement in novel ways, a number of people have contributed what they have done. And that information is available in the Exchange chatter group and in those files. And we do have an outline that tells you what things are where, so that you can download that information. We're still trying to figure out better ways to get that for us. But Susan, if you would share that, that would be wonderful. And Breck, you'll get to be our last question or comment for today.
Well, this is quite quick for Byron. I'm just curious, Byron, you said that you have speakers that are speaking in Clarksville and Nashville, some distance apart from each other. Are your speakers local, or do they travel? Do they have to travel to those live events?
No, well, I would say in general, they're local.
Yep. Okay.
So we've been fortunate with where our volunteers live in relation to the requests that we're getting. So it's not like traveling or having to stay overnight or anything like that. It's 45 minutes to an hour, give or take, for them to get to the location to do the presentation.
Yeah, thanks.
We have a staff person on this call, Tara Schaefer from Tennessee, and she says Tennessee has a broad definition of local. So just in case anyone has a question about that. Okay, Susan Jones, did you have another question or comment?
No, that was from before. I'll take my hand out.
Okay, all right. Well, does anyone else have anything you'd like to share? Again, we've got a lot of information on the repository for the Exchange. I'm going to actually even pull some of it. I did pull it out for today, but I'm going to send some of it out to you with some messages from this week when this recording gets transferred over to YouTube, just so you have a good idea of the depth of information that's there. And also, if you've got something new and could replace it, we're willing to take that at any time. So thank you all very much for coming today. And our next meeting is November 12th. Wow. And then we're going to talk about success stories, welcoming new volunteers to the team, and how we get those stories out and use those. So thank you all for attending today. I want to thank Ellen for being our second questioner, and appreciate Dr. Mary, who's listening quietly, I think, today now, and appreciate it all. Thank you very much. If you've got anything you want to share, send it to dturner@aarp.org. I'm a volunteer, but I live on that website. So thank you very much. Have a great day. We've reached the end of our call. Take care.
Mary, I was expecting to see earmuffs.
I'm at the Minneapolis airport, so still got a little ways to go.
Bummer. I hope you see the
But
Northern Lights. I think they've been really active.
yeah, that's what I heard. I know last week they were, so maybe I don't have to go all the way to Fairbanks this time to see them.
Trying to get everybody here. Got one
So it looks like you had a great, I saw 36. That was great.
got to 41.
Wow.
Yeah, I was surprised. I thought it was going to be really slow at the beginning. But we had a number of people speak who have not spoken before.
That's wonderful. Now, what were the questions again? What was the topic? I forgot.
The topic was about closing out the year with strength in volunteer engagement, aligning activities with state goals and priorities for 2025.
I thought
Are
it
you
was
still
interesting how many people went straight
Are
to
you-
advocacy. Did you think that
Are
was
you-
interesting?
Are you still recording?
Of course, and of course, I have to record now because I forgot to record at the beginning.
Just a little